Hello, Internet, and thank you for joining me today. So, it's been a while since I did like a real video, so let's just take a look see and see what's happened since I last uploaded. So, Win or Lose wrapped up. That's pretty interesting. Alright, and all jokes aside here, I need to get something off my chest here. I do not look like the image you have seen. That is just the extent of my artistic skills here. So I tried to get AI to do it, but with everything that's going on, I thought, hey, it can make an anime version of me. But every prompt I tried just made the brawny man. So I just kind of figured, why fight it? Alright, so there's that, but I also don't look like this because if you don't know me, which most of you don't, I have the body of Wings of Redemption and the raw sexual magnetism of a movie Bob. So here we go. Alright, there we go. Now we got a new profile picture. I don't think this is a profile picture, but this is the avatar that we're going to be using from now on. Alright, I already said this is about the rest of Win or Lose, so I'm not going to bother giving any more of a recap, and we're just kind of going to jump into it. And for this video, I'm just kind of going to go episode by episode and give you a real quick rundown of my thoughts, rapid fire style. So in my last video on Win or Lose, I talked a little bit about this episode, and this is the one about the girl with the sweat blob. This is the one I have the most to say about because, man, I just gotta say, this little girl broke me. You see, I'm a manly man. I do man shit, like hunting elk with pointy things and felling trees with the flat of my hand, or building a barn with my mind powers. So when I say holding back tears watching this fictional child fail was a Herculean effort, it should impress upon you the amount of emotion packed into these 20-ish minutes. The writers really do just kind of understand what it's like to have a goal in your mind and not be able to meet it. Kind of like I've had with this channel for the past year-ish that I've had it up. But to summarize this episode, it's the coach's kid, and she sucks. That's kind of all it really is. I mean, she doesn't want to suck, and that causes a lot of anxiety, and that builds on her until her dad tells her he loves her, and then she gets knocked the fuck out by a ball. It's really not a super complex plot. None of these really are. I'm going to be able to summarize most of these with a sentence or two, but this one seems like it's really simple. But I find it's with the most simple premises and the most simple stories that we're able to explore some of the deepest parts of ourselves, which I didn't even realize I had as much anxiety about failure until I watched this episode, and it really just came out of nowhere to do so. But you might be thinking to yourself that there's several other things like this out there. So why do I love this episode so much? And the answer to that is, aside from, my own personal reason of identifying with a fellow failure, this character is able to actually have flaws and an arc, It's a problem throughout the series, and we'll get into the other episodes here, but this character is able to actually fail at things. This character is actually able to, strive for something better. And that's a surprisingly powerful thing when the writers can pull it off right. The anxiety that she feels throughout this whole episode is really quite relatable because, they characterize it as this giant sweat blob, right? It starts out really small and then it builds and it builds and it builds. But here's the interesting thing. It's all her. Her dad doesn't put this pressure on her. The team doesn't put this pressure on her. The external world really isn't putting this pressure on her. But she herself wants more. And that, I think, is the true core of why this is so relatable. Because we all want more. And we're not always able to get that, but we always reach for it. And sometimes we fail, but sometimes we succeed, all that good jazz. But this episode just really puts it all into perspective. And I think this would be better if it stood alone. Like, if this was aside from all of this series, and I'm going off script here, but if this was not part of this series, and this was just one of the classic Pixar shorts, I think this would be up for awards. I think this would be one of the ones that we remember. And just one more thing real quick before we move on. Now that we have this, adorable little sweat blob here, can we all just, admit that the anxiety in Inside Out 2 really wasn't that great? Like, this is much better than that, right? Am I the only one that thinks that? Whatever. Philistines. Next episode. Episode 2 sucks. Already did a full video on it. Not going to go into anything else. Rewatched it. Still hate that guy. Moving right along. Next episode. Fuck, I'm over 6 minutes into this video and I'm only on episode 3. Ugh. This is going to be a long one, folks. Strap in. So, episode 3 is about a chick named Rochelle. And she wants to work at the snack shack, the concession stand, whatever you want to call it. And she plays on the team. Her thing is that, like, her family's poor and her mom kind of sucks, but she wants money to keep playing softball because next year dues are going up and she needs the money to do that. So she starts doing kids' homework for cash, which is unethical and pretty morally gray. And honestly, with that summary out of the way, this is actually one of the stronger episodes. I thought that after episode 1 and this one, this was going to be a really good show. Because this character is really fun. The lesson is a pretty decent one. Don't cheat. It's kind of basic. But, that's not bad. So is don't have so much anxiety. So we're going to give that a pass here. And her problem is also of her own making. But she's kind of painted as more of a victim of circumstance as opposed to a character with any real agency. And that's kind of a problem, and it'll be a repeated problem with this series, but we'll get into that just a little bit later. It's not as strong as episode 1, like I've kind of led on here, but it does provide a lot of interesting angles to come at, because she's always, personified, like her special personification thing, like the sweat glob or the armor in episode 2, is that she imagines herself as a grown-up, doing all the responsible things. And that's a powerful metaphor in and of itself, so I gotta give that a good shout out here. But the biggest thing that I think holds this episode back from being as good as episode 1 is that it's trying to create more of the plot, so to speak. The biggest thing is it introduces the bleacher creatures who are going to try to rob the snack shack using Rochelle's key. And that's the biggest reason that this episode has to exist. But as the rest of these episodes go on, you'll see that this is basically an A-tier episode. Alright. It's pretty good, but let's move on to the next one. Alright, so in episode 4, I'm feeling real conflicted at the end of it. Because, yeah, this one's all about, like, Rochelle's thought of a mom as she battles against the trials and tribulations of single motherhood. And here's my thing. I'm not a single mom. I can't identify with her. I have no idea about how hard these struggles are, and it's one of those concepts that's so heavy that I can't undertake this. It would be like trying to explain the Crusades to a banana. I'm utterly incapable of understanding all the facets of this, but they do their best to kind of bring it down to my smooth-brained level here. So, Vanessa, Rochelle's mom's name's Vanessa. She gets treated like the ultimate victim of circumstance. She loses her job, and then she loses all this sleep trying to make ends meet by being like a de facto Uber driver, or like whatever the Uber driver equivalent is in this universe. But she's just trying to make ends meet and give her kids the best life possible. However, the majority of the episode exists in different montages of her trying to get validation online and trying to make money, telling us how hard it is to be a single mom. And again, not to be a dick, but I don't think that anyone looks at single moms and is just like, oh yeah, that just seems easy. Like, we all get this. You're not hammering home a new message. I understand that, like, if you're a single mom, you might understand this, or even if you're just a mom, you might understand how impossible it is to be a mom in the modern age while you're trying to, deal with financial stresses and not. But I just can't really get with this character. It's like the episode just wasn't made for me. And so I'm not going to criticize it anymore. I'm just going to go on to the next episode. This one wasn't bad. I definitely felt something. I just, it's just not for me. Next episode. All right, so episode 5 is the second time I legitimately got mad at this show, because this is about a character named Ira. And Ira is the little brother of one of the girls on the team. Let that sink in. We have had an episode about the coach's kid, a ref in the game, another player, I don't remember what position Rochelle plays, but who cares, she's on the team, and then the mom of that character. So when we switch perspectives to this little fucker, I'm kind of like, who really cares? He's not playing in the game, and he has so little to do with everything else that's going on. I don't know why we are focusing on this little brat. The only reason that we even have this episode about this little ankle biter is because he ends up falling in with the bleacher creatures, which I'm not going to call them that anymore. I'm just going to call them what they are. They're fucking thieves, all right? They steal things, all right? Thieves. Just, they wanted to try to dress this up, but why? Because this whole episode's moral is just stealing is wrong. And that's such a simple message that I can only imagine a writer's room full of people being like, why don't we just do an episode about the kid that is the brother of one of the team members, and then stealing's wrong, and okay, that's lunch. That's how that went. I cannot imagine anything else. So the problem is that his relationship with his sister is like falling apart or something. Like, she doesn't pay as much attention to him, which she's like 12, he's like 8. This is just a difference in age. You guys are gonna go through these patches. I can't empathize with this at all. And I can't care about it because it doesn't tie into the greater plot, because everything that would tie into the greater plot is all wrapped up in what the thieves are doing. So they just should make an episode about one of the thieves. Anyway, I can only say that I don't care about this little rugrat so much, so I'm going to move on to the next episode. Alright, so episode 6 is so good that if I were the kind of YouTuber that had the editing skills to put things in a ranked order, I would rank episode 6 as my number 2, right behind number 1, which is the first episode. Which, you know what, y'all know what I mean. Anyway, this episode's about Yuen, the pitcher on the greater softball team, which brings us back to some form of relevancy after 2 episodes of having characters that aren't even on the team or play baseball. But to summarize this episode, he's in love with this one chick on the team named Taylor, who is the sister of the failed abortion from the previous episode. And anyway, they try to navigate a relationship, but they're both very immature. They're like 12, I think I mentioned that. I don't know how old these kids are, and it really doesn't matter. because over the course of the episode, we see him kind of form a relationship with the girl, and of course, we see him, get insecure and trash it. I find it really interesting that I'm watching this show, put out on Disney Plus by Pixar, that, hasn't impressed me too much outside of the first episode, but then they come around with this one and they go into a really heavy subject such as insecurity in your preteen/teen years. And it almost seems like it's coming out of nowhere, but they do a really good job of, I guess I want to say, setting it in the universe. And what I mean by that is it doesn't seem like it's really out of left field and it's just a super downer episode. They keep everything light and, bouncy. Ewan's a really fun character to just, watch him do his thing. He's a really energetic kid, so that makes the episode really neat. But we get to see his struggle from the inside, his inner monologue, and you see him wrestle with this insecurity throughout the entire episode until it finally busts out and he, basically just is a passive-aggressive little asshole. And, that's completely understandable given his age and the amount of complexity that goes into any relationship, so it doesn't feel disingenuous. And like in the first episode, this really feels like he is the driver of everything. Everything that happens to him happens as a reaction to something that he's doing, which makes it feel very natural and gives him the opportunity for growth, which refreshingly he does do. I mean, he realizes where he makes his big mistake and then immediately tries to go and fix it, but knows that the words he has said cannot be unsaid. So this very heavy topic is handled very well in this episode, and I was super impressed by it. It does rank up there with that first episode. Also, I should probably mention that Ira and the thieves are in this episode, and they are kind of setting up for the climax, where the thieves are gonna, do their big raid and steal the cash register from the Snack Shack thing. You don't care. None of this matters because the overarching plot falls apart really fast in this series. But anyway, episode 6 is definitely good. Give it a watch. But for now, next episode. Alright, episode 7. Home stretch here. So this is episode 7 about a character named Kai, who is supposed to be the best player on the team. She's kind of the whole reason that they are even going to the big game. But, yeah. So, Kai is obviously supposed to be the trans character that they changed last minute. And clearly, they should have just left it, because there's really nothing else to this character. This character is like the biggest victim since the mom. Everything just happens to this person. I mean, she gets pushed really hard by her dad, and that's supposed to be, the motivating factor behind everything. Her dad's approval. But this was already done way better in episode 1. And also, the dad character comes off as, needlessly overprotective. This guy is there to defend his kid from everything. Helicopter parenting to the max. And, I mean, it does its best to, not portray this guy as some kind of monster that's just trying to live vicariously through his kid. He's just overbearing and overprotective, and without any of the trans narrative in there, it really comes off as kind of off-putting. But the true chasms left with the erasure of the trans narrative show up because they just plugged in the most generic thing they could. With him pushing her too hard, she ends up getting injured from it. And honestly, I've seen the episode twice, and I don't think that they wrapped up this part of the story. I legitimately don't remember any part of the story where they, go see a doctor or talk about how it's just a sprain, it's not that bad, they're just going to ice it and they'll be better, but then take her out of the game. No, she plays the rest of the big game or whatever. They have a whole pizza party in the last episode. Spoilers, they have a pizza party after a softball game with a bunch of kids. But anyway, yeah, they just don't do anything with this character because the only idea that they had was, oh, let's put a trans character in it, which might have been annoying, but at least that would have been something to talk about in this episode. As it sits, there's just nothing here other than a character that has no agency, and we're supposed to identify with that. I got nothing on this one. Anyway, next episode. Woo! Made it to the studio standard 8 episodes here. And obviously this one's about the coach dad, who's named Dan. And he's the coach of the team. He's the father of the girl from episode 1, and is divorced. And he lives in a hotel / his car. I don't think they had a plan for this guy. His story centers around people just kind of taking stuff from him. Like, it's basically stated that his whole life revolves around, the softball team and everything that he's doing with his kids. But outside of that, I really don't think he has anything. It's kind of weird to think about, but, I don't think they gave him a job. I mean, maybe the softball thing is a job, but I don't think that's the case because they give it to Kai's dad, which would kind of be a random thing for parents to be able to bestow a paying job to somebody out of nowhere. So I couldn't really parse this character, which I don't think the writers could either. And that's why it's so clumsy feeling that the coaching gig and his divorce are supposed to be intertwined in some way. I don't know. They don't give enough time to this character to develop him fully. So I'm not even going to try to, go through him again. But yeah, the rest of this episode is just him blowing up at the umpire and then having to wrap up every other character's storyline. So this episode, I think, was always going to be messy. What's weird is that there's several points in the story of this episode that I just kind of block out because it kind of just rushes to the end. The thieves get caught, obviously. I don't remember how they get caught, but they get caught. And nothing happens to the little ankle biter kid. Ewan and Taylor break up, which we already knew was going to happen from Ewan's episode. And that's, all nice, neat, with a bow on top. And the funniest part to me is that it's hinted at the very end of the episode that the teacher guy from episode 2 and Vanessa, the mom, get together at the end. And I thought that was brilliant. Because with their personalities clashing, I can only imagine the absolute nightmare that their relationship would be. I want Pixar to do a 4-hour movie of just their breakup, where the first hour is this horrifically uncomfortable fight between the two of them, and then the next 3 hours is just that waste of space crying in his car. I'd go to the theaters twice to see that. So to wrap up here, the series as a whole is pretty okay. I think the premise is good, and the animation is stellar for 99% of the time. But several characters get everything wrong with them, and other characters just don't get developed enough. But if you take Ira and the teacher out of the equation entirely, you still only have really Ewan and the sweat girl with any real agency and any real stakes to kind of go into an arc on. Everyone else is just kind of pushed around by other characters or the world itself. They're just victims of society. And you can't really latch on to characters like that. And when you're doing a very character-driven show like this, that's really important. I have heard no other YouTube channels talking about this show, so maybe I've found a niche here. Or maybe this is just the most bland thing in the world, and there's just not a whole lot to critique. And there's only so many ways that I can randomly throw shade at fictional children to liven things up. But ultimately, I wouldn't steer anyone away from this, but I also don't want to give everyone the impression that this is the next big thing. But that's going to do it for me today. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe and give me a comment down there. I always love reading those. But until next time, I am Spiff the Ice King. Sayonara, bitches.